that was signed last year in October with Kenya, which was ratified by Parliament later. And so, and also the President of Kenya, William Ruto, has indicated that, he's open to creating Kenya to become a diplomatic hub for the continent. And so, given the distances between Kenya and Kenya is like the heart of Africa. It's the shortest distance from most of the to most of the countries. So, yeah, interesting. But at the same time, questions arise because the French are known to have not, or it is said that they are quite intolerant and they have done bad things in Burkina Faso. Anybody who's bothered to know. It has been said that in the previous experiences, the coups that they are saying are happening in West Africa are partly were partly supported by the French to put their own peoples. Examples are where Thomas Sankara, that has been said. An experience is being said of Niger and other countries that have a very serious anti-French sentiment. So it's a developing relationship because it's deepening now. With what the French are trying to do, and the fact that William Ruto has been, Nairobi has been invited to Paris for the G7 summit, and that's important. And the fact that, since 2019, again, Macron, the president of France, Macron has come again to Nairobi. It starts to show you the seriousness with which the French are starting to take Kenya. And so it'll be interesting to see how this develops. And maybe as we dig deeper into this conversation on why exactly Kenya and why Africa Forward Summit in Nairobi. But interesting days, and for diplomacy, this is what people would love to. It's an interesting relationship, especially Kenya being the first Anglophone country to host the French summit that was renamed to Africa Forward Summit. So, Eli, I think that's how it started, but looking forward to learning and open to also understanding, this is a nuanced conversation. Diplomacy is not straightforward because there's what you give and there's what is taken, and it's how you negotiate. So let's see, is it beneficial to Kenya or is it benefiting the French more than it's benefiting Kenyans? So yeah, that's it for a start, and let's see how it progresses.
Thank you very much, Obed. Quite a number of items you've already covered. Just to give us some starter in what this conversation about the African Forward Summit is all about. Of course, giving us a background of President Macron and the possible significance this will have into our politics and even standing out from how we trade and how we associate geopolitically. And to give us that perspective, of course, as I earlier said on, we have Sitati Wasilwa, who is joining us virtually in our studios tonight. And Sitati, good evening to you. Welcome back. It's been a long time since you came to our studios. What happened? Ulinunuliwa?
No, unlike other cheap individuals who have a price on them, I don't think anyone can afford me. So I've been much, just keeping tabs on the great work that the Court FM fraternity and Mizani 254 have been doing over time. And I think the last time we chatted was, at the onset of the Iran, Israel, and the United States conflict in the Middle East. So it's still interesting to come and deliberate over another geopolitical issue of grandstanding, if I may say so.
Thank you very much, Sitati. And of course, I'm happy to understand from you that you are not for sale and you are expensive, if that was an offer on the table. And tonight we are discussing matters that probably you might be interested in or not. However, they could just affect how you as a citizen and the rest of you will be looking at how Kenya functions. So France seems to be strategically warming up to East Africa, gradually opening its arms while shifting away from its traditional Francophone West Africa focus. And one wonders, what is the bigger picture? Is President Macron being futuristic or simply searching for a new home through Nairobi? And people have faulted Nairobi diplomacy. But then again, I ask, why is France and why Kenya The Africa Forward Summit is underway, and to give us some perspective, we want to now cross over back to you, Sitati, so that you can try and dig deep into this conversation. Sitati, why Kenya is my first question.
Well, I mean, Kenya, from the perspective of the Western, part of the world, has considered to be a very strategic partner. First of all, it doesn't really have some really strong anti-Western states or government sentiments. And this is not just in the case of probably the recent happenings in Africa, especially in a few Francophone countries. I mean, it goes back to history. Even the first post-colonial government in Kenya under Jomo Kenyatta, it was pretty much friendly to Western states. I mean, it was strong. I mean, it was strongly affiliated or allied with, Britain, with the United States, and other Western states. Yeah. So that is the starting point. But I mean, look, France under Emmanuel Macron, when he became the president in 2017, he set out to recalibrate, to change the foreign policy of France towards Africa. So this was in recognition of, the atrocities and, the hard power kind of approach that the previous, successive governments of France had taken, which was synonymous with, direct military interventions in Francophone countries, mostly, and, which entailed deployment of boots on the ground military forces. So give credit to Macron. I mean, a little bit. He's tried to rework that. And there are sort of three pillars when you look at that foreign policy recalibration way back in 2017 that Macron attempted to bring on board. And one of the pillars concerning that, the purported new policy of France towards Africa, was to have it based at least on promoting some sort of small and medium scale enterprises. And then second of all, to generally promote could be energy transition and other related investments and such kind of things. And then to, move France from the fact that it was well known for deployment of this, military forces, as I had said, at least to other much more civil or rather, positively perceived military approaches, security and defense partnerships with African countries. And don't forget, the most important thing is to shift the focus away from the Francophone countries to other countries, be they Anglophone, those are the English speaking, or Lusophone, which are the Portuguese speaking, and other varied, countries with, varied colonial roots in Africa. So that's a kind of shift. But this is also in recognition of the fact that other major powers are also coming into Africa. I mean, you look at China. China is so big in terms of infrastructure and other forms of soft power, if we can call that or refer to that, in Africa. I mean, offering scholarships. Right now, we have so many Africans going to China for scholarships. You have Turkey. I mean, it's growing. I mean, in terms of security and defense partnerships with African countries. We also have, other traditional allies that have been around for quite some time. The United States, the UK. Collectively, we also have the European Union. We also have Germany on its side. India as well. So the Gulf states, they are big in providing capital for African countries, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and so on and so forth. So it's a recognition that the world is changing, especially Africa. Africa is still a battleground for the interests of many other powers across the world. So it was only fair for France and Emmanuel Macron to try and shift this strategy. Is either you change and sail with the current winds, or you remain behind and perish. I think that's where Macron was coming from.
Interesting. And you talk about perishing. I don't know if that's the same opinion my colleague on the other end holds. Let's find out as we listen to Obeds. Obeds, I hope you have enough team to help us understand why Kenya is important in the Africa Forward Summit, specifically coming from the French. This is the first time an English-speaking country is actually having the honors. I don't know if I should call them honors. Obeds.
So, diplomatically, and to the President William, Nairobi has been honored, and it means a lot to him, which, in his view, is a big honor diplomatically. But then you ask why Kenya. You need to realize that Kenya as a country for a long time, despite the fact that Kenya did say that it's non-aligned, Kenya has been leaning more west. And that is not unusual. It's not new. And interestingly, we tend to be quite open-minded in quotes, and I'm careful to use open-minded compared to other African countries. And the other thing is, as a matter of fact, maybe given the fact that the other biggest resource Kenya has had and has sold for a long time, and actually even the president joking, which was a diplomatic gaffe about Nigeria not speaking good English, is the fact that Kenya's population is the biggest asset in terms of human resource. But then there is also a tendency by the regimes, successive regimes from post-independence, to rely and almost become a steady hand in terms of selling Kenya as a stable and the most predictable country within the region, despite the fact that Kenya is in a space where there's a lot of conflict. When you look at Somalia, look at Sudan, look at even Uganda sometimes had issues at some point. So because of that, it's been deemed, and to the West, Kenya is a space where it's reliable. At the same time, the West and the United Nations has offices in Nairobi. And for as I said, the World Bank has increased its number of vice presidents to Nairobi. It's testament to the fact that Nairobi is becoming, according to them, a bigger hub. And also the UN is also expanding Nairobi, I think, in Nairobi. So it's obvious that any country that is keen in the shift in geopolitics would definitely want not to be left behind. And the French, in their view, despite the challenges that they've had in West Africa and the Francophone, especially the coups and all that has been, and the strong anti-French sentiment, they find Nairobi as a wonderful opportunity to be able to further their interest, and at the same time, in the interest of Nairobi, if Nairobi has something to demand for, diplomacy is about negotiation. And you see, they say diplomacy works until it does not work, or it doesn't work until it works. So I think it's a positive in a way that Nairobi is being looked at as growing and being open to as a diplomatic hub, and at the same time provide the human resource that it needs. And like the expansion of the UN should employ quite a number of people. So it's a win-win situation, but we have to go to the nitty-gritties of what is being said or what has been agreed in terms of what has been signed to find out exactly what is the benefit. I think that's the gist of it, because sometimes we know, and we've talked about this. I remember when we were talking about the Kenyan soldiers, police going to Haiti, and the questions we're asking geopolitically: why is Kenya doing that, and what is the benefit? So half the time, it is not the intention, but probably how do we negotiate to ensure that we get the most and the best out of what we get ourselves into. So I think Nairobi has a wonderful opportunity to prove and demonstrate that it's a hub for diplomacy, and given the connectivity, the fact that in terms of IT, AI, and quite a number of things. Nairobi is quite advanced compared to the neighbors. And so because of that, there's a sense, and I think there's an argument that it's not that Nairobi is better than everybody else, but Nairobi is technologically advanced, and because of that, then probably the West would feel, or France would feel, they have an opportunity to do this and do it. Nairobi is a maiden place where they've done a first summit, a French Africa summit in an Anglophone country. It meant a lot to Nairobi. It's a good thing. It's a good sign.
Well, quite some argument there, I have to say, in terms of why
So, Eli,
Nairobi. Yes, pardon
have
me.
any?
Pardon me.
Okay,
I hear your arguments in terms of why Nairobi. And, Sitati and I were nodding our heads. To some extent, Sitati, you have some, affiliation with what Obeds is mentioning when it comes to why Nairobi and why the strategic partnership might just work. But the French do not have the best of history when it comes to human rights and how they have played with their, the colonial areas that they had influence in. We know it is known for butchering, if not to mention, its own people. So I don't know, what kind of collaboration can we stand to gain right now with the French? Because for me, that's important. Obed, rather, Sitati.
Well, look, Liquiani, you've raised a very valid issue. I mean, when you look at the comments, especially on social media platforms, people are raising concerns that, the French have, have an atrocious sort of a history in Francophone countries, especially in West Africa. So are they likely to transmit the same kind of, historical dirt in Kenya? But I think, in all fairness, times have changed. Times have really changed, and I don't see in what way that the French later on are going to cut back on, the deals that they have signed with the Kenyan government and say, okay, we are going to do this and that in a manner in which it is going to jeopardize perhaps the human rights position or standing of the country. I don't see that happening. But again, look, you have to be extremely pragmatic and realistic when you are dealing with, whoever state you are, when you're trying to cut deals with another state. If we talk about the atrocious human rights record of the French, especially in West Africa,
Yeah.
all these powers are guilty in one way or another. All these foreign powers that are in Africa are guilty in one way or another, as far as interfering or jeopardizing human rights is concerned. For instance, we know the United States. The kind of record that they have across the world. From supporting military dictatorships, not very far. The Democratic Republic of Congo, and none other than Mobutu Sese Seko.
Correct.
We all know who Mobutu was, but the United States, despite the fact that it takes pride in being one of the most stable democracies in the world, decided to support him. Even right now, don't forget that the current president of the DRC, Felix Tshisekedi, recently, it should have been maybe 5 or so days ago, he said that he's thinking about running for a third term in office. Can you imagine? Contrary to the constitution of the country. And he's also making claims that elections in the DRC could be postponed for security reasons linked to the M23 insurgency in North Kivu, South Kivu provinces. But he's saying that confidently, knowing very well that he has the support of the United States. You remember the Mendos for Security Agreement between the two countries that was signed in Washington. Should have been on the 4th of December in 2025. Now, let us look at China. China has been the biggest, one of the most influential foreign powers in Africa, especially since the turn of the millennium in the year 2000. But what are the Chinese known for? I mean, especially in China, I mean, the government of China, the state of China, whatever that is, they are perceived not to entertain, different opinions, political opinions, especially opposition towards the government. But they are here doing business and they don't really care. I mean, maybe that's one of their biggest advantages. They don't really care how politics goes. They don't interfere with your political affairs as long as you're in good business terms, right? But when you scrutinize the kind of contracts that African governments agree or approve from China, they are a little bit, they have some queries, on, the sort of clauses that are tied to these African governments.
Correct.
Look at Turkey. Way back, or rather back home in Turkey, President Recep Erdogan is not really known to be a democratic fellow. He's not a Democrat by whatever standard you can think of.
Yeah.
There are certain ethnic minorities which have been persecuted in Turkey for very long.
Yeah.
Right? You look at India. India is also trying to scale up its stakes in Africa. But you look at India, does it have a clean name as far as human rights is concerned? No. Right? Absolutely not. You look at the Gulf states that are here, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, are they democratic by any chance? No. I mean, UAE is supporting the rapid support forces in Sudan. We know that. The Saudi Arabia also has its own proxy groups in a few parts of Africa. So there is no state that is present in Africa that has a clean record as far as human rights is concerned. But for France, since they are very much interested, and I think Macron, I don't think he is naive. He recognizes that France has that wretched history in Africa. So he'd really try as much as possible to clean, the name of the state, so that at least he can prove, or the French people can prove to the rest of the world, especially Africans, that you see what? We recognize our failures. And I guess that's why one of the pillars of the turnaround in the Africa foreign policy by France was to try and ask for forgiveness for all these atrocities committed in the past. And he'll only be foolish to continue with the same kind of stuff in other parts of Africa. So that's my position on that issue, Eli.
In short, you are saying that Macron is showing that the French are coming with a repentant heart, not the same that the missionaries came with back before colonization. But I don't think that is what the rest of Kenyans believe. I am looking at a comment here by one gentleman, his name, let me just get the name, Oletunda, who says, bad blood ready, Macron lashed out at our young men and women. He was sent away by Ibrahim Traore. Kasongo Nazake welcomes him. We the people shall. I know there's a lot of hate happening on the X session. I'm going to hand over back to you. And for those of you who are watching, you can send in your comments. +254 714 308 is the number through WhatsApp. You can equally watch us live on that is Mizani 254 X broadcast and on our YouTube channel Court FM. You can equally stream this live on radio on www.kotfm.co.ke. Over to you, Obeds, and speak to us. What's happening there?
So thanks. There's quite a number of hands up here. So Western, request that you mute your mic before. So there's also an obvious fact here that France has to re-strategize, and there has to be a plan B for any country. It's always about interest, and obviously Kenya also has its own needs. And we all know that, foreign policy is majorly dictated by the internal affairs and the politics of a country. So as we stand today, France has a lot of problems to sort out, especially because of the challenge in West Africa. But I'd like to hear what Ravenix has to say. Then I'd have Matt, and then Western in that order. I don't know, Eli, if that's okay, but I feel that that's the best way to approach it. Ravenix?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening. I hope you guys are doing good. I just
100%.
wanted to
Thank you.
comment on some things that was said by Mazi, the host of the panel, in terms of why does France has a huge history with West Africa, the way it went about its foreign politics. And I would say that that's the case for the British people, as the last person said. That's the case for the Americans, and the Americans are doing it today. But African leaders should go to the Americans for money, for support or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So what is different from for the Americans and the French? But for the fact that the French, and just to say something more about that, the French, the leaders of those francophone countries of Sahel that are all talking about France and the way it was. They are saying that because France did not support their coup. Because if France has come out and say, okay, your coup is legitimate, we're going to support whatever you did and whatever you want to do, you won't see these countries coming to talk about the French history with them, talking about how the French did whatever it did to them. They won't be out here saying it. They're only saying it because maybe the French didn't want to support their government, so they had to become Pan-Africanist to further their agenda in their countries. Nobody is saying that France has been a good player and the way it went about its politics, but it's like every other country. They have the good parts, and they have the part that went wrong. And yeah, the politics that went in Sahel was the wrong politics. Seeing the way it ended. But I think that for Kenya, it's a good, how will I put it? It's an opportunity. In every crisis, there's an opportunity. France is looking for a way to open itself, maybe to less, because France has been focused wholesomely on its francophone countries for a long time, and seeing that maybe the being focused on the French part of Africa is not really bearing fruit, and they're being, how will I put it, because if you see, France has a very good relationship with countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Gabon, the Congo, and it's only these three Sahel countries that you hear. Yeah, a little bit of with Senegal, even Senegal with their Pan-Africanist government still has a good relationship with France. So who are the people saying that France are bad to them or whatever? You can see it's always those three Sahel countries that had a coup d'état, that brought in military leaders that are looking for legitimacy, and their legitimacy will come from finding a boogeyman outside instead of finding the problems within. So I think for Kenya, it's a very good opportunity to have a new strategic partner, because France is not nobody. France is part of the UN Council. It's a rich country, and there's business to be done with Kenyan. And if the Kenyans are wise enough to know that there's a role to play with mutual beneficial aspect of it, I think there's something to be played. Because if Kenya becomes a place where because France is not going to do the same politics it did before. It knows that with Kenya, it has a way to create a new African politics for itself. So I think it's an opportunity for Kenya to help France also define its politics for Africa for the next future. So if Kenya plays it right, there's a way that there can be a roadmap for other African countries to follow in the way to interact with these foreign powers in a new way. So I think in every crisis there's an opportunity, and I think for Kenya it's a good opportunity to put himself in the spotlight. It's a country that has a lot of good English speakers, with a lot of trained people that with a lot of skills. So I think there's an opportunity here for Kenya in every aspect of things. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ravenix, and quite an approach there. And truly, no country, as you say, is perfect. There's both a good and bad side. That said, I'd like to allow Matt. Matt, what's your take on the conversation? And do you think this is a good opportunity for Kenya, or it's us, choosing to pick from where West Africa has left it? and we are taking advantage of the fact that there's been a challenge there. So these are opportunity from the crisis that the French are facing.
Yeah, thank you, host. I couldn't help but notice that there's been a huge social media campaign to sanitize the French, just as the French are holding this French Africa summit. It's quite impressive what the French are able to do. But let's. I think what you are trying to say is that the French are comparable in their atrocities to what other colonial powers have done in Africa. That is 100% false. Okay, and also saying that the French have also turned a new leaf and they now care about Africans. This is also, in fact, false. Okay, so I'll make my case, and I'll leave guys to do their paid gig. Okay. So first of all,
you see, Matt, this is the opportunity and the place to speak. We do not limit you. Air your opinion, and we'll be able to debate.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's sometimes I think engaging these things also gives them legitimacy, because they feed off engagement. But let me just go on. So first of all, the French signed an immunity deal quite recently in Kenya, right? And so that they wouldn't be prosecuted for anything that they would do. That's the first thing that they did, right? So these are not the actions of a person who's turned a new life, right? Seeking immunity before anything even starts. Secondly, the French, even in their media, have openly talked about working with the Ukrainians and jihadis and Tuareg separatists in the AES for the recent attacks that have happened in Mali, right? This is not. So this is very recent. So there is no proof, for instance, on that sense that they have turned a new leaf to openly even admit in their own media that they're working with jihadis. The other thing is that there is also, of course, their work with the Nigerians to bomb Benin when those guys were looking for sea access. Not to mention, they've also been at the EU Parliament lobbying heavily to get the AES sanction. Now, you could say that the Traore and his group, right, were doing this because they lacked legitimacy, and they were looking for that legitimacy from the French. Well, that is a weak argument, but an argument that could be made. In his own words, he did say that what he was looking for were better terms for those for how things were to be dealt with. For instance, the price at which the French were buying uranium was, I think, below $1, and it was around I don't remember per unit of uranium. I can't remember, but it was $200 for what, for instance, the Australians would sell. So the French were benefiting greatly from the people in the AES, not to mention the other trade imbalances. I also do know a bunch of people from other Francophone countries, including Senegal, Togo, Cameroon. They do know that they live under French occupation, right? Their currencies are printed by France. They and not to mention that they also have to store their what do you call it? They have to store gold reserves with France, right? So France is very happy shipping away African gold, right? Every time, and they also pay to have their currency printed. Another thing that France has done in these countries, now maybe I'm going back in time, France, when it came to time to leave the African continent, it made these African countries pay a tax, basically a fee for colonization, because France considered that it had developed and civilized these people and made them pay for it. A lot of those countries have finished paying lately. This is also what they did in Haiti, right? Another thing, of course, that the French did was test nuclear weapons in Algeria. This is part of the reason Nigeria broke ties with the French government a while back. Well, I think in the 70s. Yeah. So to really say that the French are comparable in terms of the atrocities they committed, it's not even night and day. Just looking at the level of development between Francophone and Anglophone Africa says otherwise, right? There is a big reason. You really just have to look, right? Now, now have these people who are collaborating with these guys to destabilize these countries suddenly turned a new leaf? I don't even know how this is a matter for discussion. It's clearly obvious that are people who preach sovereignty within the EU. They are very strict about their own sovereignty as the French, right? They have their own nuclear weapons. And they unlike the other countries that depend on the US nuclear umbrella, right? But they do not want that for you, okay? So anyway, what I would say is that for one, you wouldn't compare French occupation to, for instance, British occupation or American occupation. I also forgot, of course, the involvement of the French with the genocide in Rwanda. Anyway, here's my point. Comparing the French to the other colonial powers in Africa is not, it will be comparing apples to oranges. The French were much more brutal in terms of the oppression of even those people to date. Now, what Ruto is doing working with the French is benefiting himself. That's what it is. The current regime is benefiting itself. And the French are looking for a new base in the African continent because they need it, right? Now, is that beneficial for the people of Kenya? I highly doubt it. Were the French able to bring security or peace or prosperity in the Francophone countries that they've occupied for so long? No. Are they likely to now change and bring that prosperity and security to Kenya? I wouldn't hold my breath. But yeah, I think that's all I have for now. I really hadn't planned on speaking on this. I just wanted to clarify a bit on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Matt. We never have a problem with having divided opinion. And from what I'm hearing, you say it's all doom and gloom, and the French probably don't come with any blessing or any good with them. It's a conversation to have. That's why I say diplomacy is about interest, and every country or every state, Nairobi has its agenda. Paris,
well,
what
interest? What interest does the predator and the prey have? There is no mutual benefit that will exist between predator and prey.
Matt, for obvious reasons, we can discuss. But when it comes to international relations and geopolitics, I think that's a conversation to have. And we can always debate about it, the merits and demerits. But that is true, as a matter of fact. Weston, you've had the conversation, and I'd like to welcome you because I know this is bread and butter. What is your take on the relationship, or why Kenya particularly, and the French coming to Nairobi? What is it? Does it benefit Nairobi? Are the French trying to find an alternative? What exactly is your take on this conversation? Karibu sana.
Obviously, the question one would pose back is, why not Kenya? Why not Kenya? You see, Obed, if you do ideological politics, you are caught up in a time warp. Ideological politics. You've got this position, and that position is immutable. It doesn't change. And you've got a dichotomy. These are your friends and these are your foes. They don't change. So you clearly know when you're dealing with the British, you know who you're dealing with. You're dealing with the French, no. These are suspicious characters. Well, even in antiquity, no one did politics like that. None whatsoever. Because as we speak now, for those who don't know, Donald Trump is almost setting off for Beijing. You don't know that? For Beijing, a 2-day official visit. Okay, when you listen to the media, what do they tell you? The relations between Washington, D.C. and Beijing are like. You think they'll go to war tomorrow? Wouldn't that be the case? They can't see eye to eye. She cannot, welcome Donald Trump to Beijing and vice versa. Come on. Come on. What kind of politics is that? The interests that Donald Trump knows only China can help America, meet those interests. And China knows the interest that only the United States of America can help them realize them. So, like Siamese twins, their economies, their destinies, their politics are entwined. What is this about operating in silos that is so commonplace in Kenya? What is it? And then when you say about comparison, how do you even compare atrocities? Look, the entry point here is imperialism. That is the word. Imperialism. The British are imperialists. Americans are imperialists. The French are imperialists. The Russians are imperialists. In the global south, China, given its immense power economically, politically, diplomatically, we talk about sub-imperialism. The Japanese are imperialists. We don't know that. So on that basis, you say you can't compare what the French have done. And do you know what imperialists do? Do you know what they do? You go and look what that word means. The atrocities in Belgian Congo was responsible for those atrocities. The first recorded genocide in history in Namibia was responsible for that. And the Americans, even as we speak now, they're committing atrocities. What do you mean by you can't compare? You don't know what's going on in Gaza. You don't know what went on in Iraq the other day. You don't know what just has been going on in Iran the other day. Those atrocities are happening as we speak. Lebanon, you don't know those things. Well, what is this comparison we're talking about? We're sanitizing the French. Who can even do that? The fact of the matter is that times have changed. They have changed. And if you don't change, so I hear this about, I don't know, the Burkina, other people have chased away the French, Malian. And then why haven't you chased away the British? So you keep your British and then you celebrate what you think the Burkinabe people have done in West Africa or Nigerians or Malian. Why are you keeping your British? If you're so committed to anti-imperialism, why are you keeping your British? Why don't you chase them away? Why? Naturally, the French will come to Nairobi because you're keeping your British. You can also engage them when you don't mind. So when did we develop this anti-imperialism stance, Obets? Since when? Since when? I want to hear. Since when? Americans. Why haven't we chased away the Americans from Kenya? Aren't they imperialists? Aren't they? So the French, these ones we can't engage with them. They're suspicious characters. They have committed atrocities. These other people, they even commit as we speak now. It's not even history. As we speak now, they're committing. Under which umbrella? The UN Security Council, in which the French belong. So what is this about cherry picking, Obets? What is this about cherry picking? Human rights don't count as we speak now. Please, human rights don't count. It's about your interests. The Americans will kill you. If killing you enables them to meet the interest, they're going to take you out. The British will take you out. If taking you out will enable them meet their interests, they will take you out. The French will do the same thing. The Chinese will do the same thing. What is it we don't know? The Russians will do the same thing. So what is it? Like there are good guys and bad guys in international politics? Which ones? When did those? So if you're Kenya, you're the president of Kenya, show me the rock under which you're going to hide and say, I'm avoiding the French, I'm avoiding the British, I'm avoiding the Americans, I'm avoiding the Russians. This rock where I'm hidden, here, there are no imperialists here. They're only good guys. Show me where that rock is. Even amongst ourselves in Africa, we are suspicious of one another, aren't we? That's why we're not doing business with one another as we ought, we should. We're not. So if the French leave us to our own devices, the Americans, you want to tell me we'll get it right? Is that what you think? The world is a lot more complex than that. That's the point that I'm making. It's a lot more complex. These characters, If you don't know, just take away those things about international law. Take away those things about human rights. Take away those things about international norms. Those things, just yank them off. It's just about raw power. And this America first thing that Donald Trump is reminding us. It's not new, it's been there. But he is audacious enough to spell it out. America's interest. I'm going to bomb you. If you are standing between me and my interest, I'll bomb you. I'll bomb the hell out of you. He says it and he does it, but still we don't understand. We don't get it. So when are we going to get it? When will you get
it? Western, actually, and you've placed it quite well. And this is a very good way to look at exactly what international relations is and your politics. Allow me to chime in. Sorry, not, but to bring in Sitati. Sitati, you've listened to what has been said, and we're coming back to X again. We're going back to TikTok a little bit, and then we come back to X. Sitati, you've heard what has been said, and interestingly, as a matter of fact, it's always about interest. As much as we want to argue any other way, sugarcoat it any other way. However, what's your take, and probably is there anything you'd like to pick about what has been said and probably clarify or disagree with?
And, Eli and other fantastic speakers and the great listeners who are tuning in from whatever different platforms. You see, when it comes to international relations and geopolitics, and I'm glad Western has really elaborated on that. At the end of the day, is how do you position yourself for all these interests that are flying around the corner or that are flying around from different corners? So we can debate, we can talk, right? But what is it that we're getting, for instance, from the French? That is a critical question that we need to ask ourselves. Number two, are we going on to hang on to these histories? I mean, myself, I love history. Many guys out here, they do. It's good to be informed about history. But what is the bigger picture in this case? Yeah. So we can run about, we can turn around, but in the history of humanity, imperialism, all these atrocious kind of activities will always characterize human interactions and development, whether at local levels, national levels, regional, and even at the global levels. So I guess at this point, the most important conversation that we need to be having is how can African countries rather position themselves? Because you see, the United States has its own summit for Africans, for African governments. The Japanese, they do have their own summits, which they invite heads of states and governments from Africa. The Russians have the same kind of arrangement, and even the Chinese. So how can Africans leverage their strengths in this case? But I don't see that happening, because African countries will behave as if, we are still confused, we are disorganized. And the fact of the matter remains, realistically, if you're a weaker power, then definitely you're never going to call the shots. You're never going to dictate, how the game is played. You can, but I mean, if you're highly dependent on others, that one's never going to happen. So I still see hundreds of years from now, African countries will still be begging, they'll still be following the agenda set by the other fellows, powerful fellows around the world. So that's just politics. And I mean, you can't really hate the player at this point. I mean, it's just the rules of the game. And you either, pull up the socks or you continue suffering like we've done. After all, we've proven to be almost incapable of governing ourselves. And even these three countries that people keep on talking about in the Sahel region, I mean, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, you chased away the French. They left. has the state of affairs improved? No, that is a fact. So you can keep on saying, oh, we still blame the French. Another time you'll hear them, the heads of state of those governments and their propagandists across Africa would run around and say, oh, but you see, we are blaming Cote d'Ivoire. That's the Ivory Coast, because it's a close ally to France. So we can run around and bring all these kind of conversations as much as we want, but most of these countries have proven incapable. And even to shed more light on these three states, the French left, but what are these three governments, or countries rather, attempting to do? For starters, if indeed Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali were attempting to pursue full sovereignty, then what is this, sort of arrangements they're having with these other global institutions? I mean, the World Bank, the World Bank is still giving credible support, financially speaking, development-wise, to Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. We have to be realistic, okay? And even those fellows, you keep praising, oh, Traore this, Traore that, Traore this. Traore is not even a quarter of what Thomas Sankara was. That's something perhaps many people don't want to accept, but it is the truth. So recently, Mali and Niger in particular have been having conversations with who? The United States. They are now discussing how can we help each other. The United States says we are in need of the minerals. This guy say, the guys in this country say, okay, we are facing, a challenge with the insecurity. Can you help us? So where is this sovereignty as far as these arrangements are concerned? Because even those heads of these governments that are being praised all over Africa for promoting sovereignty, from Traore himself to Assimi Goita in Mali to General Chiani in Niger, they are still running to the Western states for assistance. So where is this sovereignty? And even just to close it off, the so-called Alliance of Sahel states that they established, after breaking away from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, they have terribly failed to keep it going. So I don't know. We have to be a little bit careful. And I think we also have to be extremely realistic when pursuing these things. Because in the game of power, locally, regionally, globally, you cannot attempt to isolate yourself and then claim that you want to pursue some, significant ways in which you can help your people to develop. Isolation is dangerous. And I think these three countries that are touted quite a lot, but driven very much by propaganda, can bear witness to this particular fact. Thank you very much.
Interesting. And
Thank
that,
you,
of course.
Eli, probably just to buttress,
Yes.
I'll get it back to you. Just to buttress the point, as a matter of fact, it's easier to point fingers and, let's say there's unfairness in the system. The truth is we don't have the same capacities, but then we can leverage on what we have and negotiate better. Some African countries have proven that they're able to stand up to some things that they're not confident and comfortable about. Botswana is an example. Namibia recently has done something that's a bit different from what everybody has done. So in my view, I think, Kila, we've spoken about this again before, that it's how we sell ourselves. It's how we negotiate. So what we have, what is it that the other countries want? And how do we ensure that we get the most and the best value out of what we have, is so that at the end of the day, it doesn't look like somebody's taking advantage of us. The fact is, France requires ABCD things to be done. We have what we lack. So why would you go and sell yourself short? Or because we have blinded leadership that thinks about self first and not country first, whereas probably the other powers are looking at our country first, then our own interest second. So I think for me, it's a fact that for a long time our leadership has sold Africans short, and on that basis, probably it is felt like other people are taking advantage of us, which is possible. But then, if you negotiate from a point of weakness, not appreciating what you have, then you will undervalue yourself, and you'll end up in a situation where it's easier to complain and point fingers and blame other people, but not looking inward and realizing we haven't done a good job of it. Eli, back to you, I think, and then you people to welcome others.
Definitely, that is not what is supposed to be happening here. I know there's a lot of exchange that is happening on the X session, and we are also streaming this live on radio. So if you love to add your comments, the number to do that, it's +254 7143 8277. Obeds, I just want to go back to your team because I see there are a lot of speakers who are waiting. Diamonds is also joining us. Good evening, Diamonds. How are you doing this evening? Hii mambo ya Kenya na Wafaransa, where do you sit?
Good evening, how are you?
I am well, great to have you
Just
here.
confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Been a minute. I hope you guys are okay. I think I think at the bench.
Your microphone, Diamonds, is muffled. We can't hear you.
We can't hear you. I can't hear you either.
Yeah.
Okay, I've just dropped here. Just tell me, is it much better?
You're clearer.
Much better. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying, Eli, I sit at the bench. I just watch. Just want to watch the events. But look, 30% of me says I think it is okay to continue looking for partnerships with other countries. Obviously, the need to isolate from those powers should not exist. There should be no need of isolation. In fact, we should be working with everybody. We want to work with the French, we want to work with the US, we want to work with China and every other person. I think that's my first point of view. The second one, which takes 70% of my art, is that we must also be very careful with the actions and the things that we do and we give away, because remember, when these powers come to us, they obviously want to have a bite. So depending on how weak we look, depending on how much we give them, if we are not very careful, it might at the end of the day turn out to be a very bad move for us. I think we've seen many instances where these foreign countries have turned out to become negative for countries. You remember what China did to Zambia? I think 2-3 years ago, Zambia was going through a lot of problems because they had taken too many Fuliza loans and they were unable to repay China. So that's something that I think we must be very careful. Secondly, is that obviously the French are not a very good friend. I think whether you call it an ally, you call it a friend or whatever, I think they are not very good. If you look at their history before, many countries that I can say were colonized by the French have really suffered. Most of the Francophone countries have not really taken off economically. So remember, at some point, some of them were even being handled as if they were provinces for France. In terms of how they take care of minerals from those countries, I think you can look at the numbers. The French, for example, are sitting with almost 6 tons of gold, yet they have no known gold. They have no known gold mine. Yet the countries, the Malis of this world that produce a lot of these minerals have nothing. Countries that produce uranium, for example, I think it is Niger, that's been funding nuclear power in France for a very long time without them getting anything in return, nothing substantial in return. There are obviously issues around of how they manage politics, they manage local politics. There are issues around how they have too much of a hand in some of those countries. I think I look at Cameroon, for example, as an example. I think there's been so much of interruption from the French. I look at most of the countries, I look at the Nigers, the Malis, that you're using them as bad examples. I think these countries have not been given a chance, and they were not given a chance to actually set up better systems. Are we much better? Maybe a little bit better if we compare to some of the Francophone countries and the ones that were actually colonized by the French. The Anglophones had a little bit better systems. Did the British continue having a hand in Kenya? Yes, they did. They still have a hand even today. They still have a hand in Uganda. They still have a hand in most of these countries. But the amount of impact and the amount of space they've been given to operate with, to make their own mistakes, much better. You can't compare Anglophone countries that we have within Africa. If you look at the top African economies today, you'll talk of Egypt, you'll talk of South Africa, you will talk of Nigeria, you will talk of most of these countries, even on the northern belt. But if you look at top 10 countries, most of them are actually countries that were colonized by the British. Why I'm talking about this is that the effect of politics and the effect and allowing countries to actually get their resources. If you look at South Africa, they have gold, they have diamond, and many other things. And I think they actually had a chance to actually get return from them. Countries like Mali, the gold, the oils, the uranium, I think in Niger, all these countries have had a lot of negative influence from the French. So as Kenya signs these deals, I think we need to ask ourselves, what is the French taking back? Are we signing off some of our minerals? If they are, then which ones? Are we signing off some? Because I know they want something from Kenya. The question is, what is it? Are we signing off security deals? Are they coming now to and they have a serious hand when it comes to politics. They don't really let you fly on. So is it going as we move forward as a country, are we going to see a hand of the French trying to decide who becomes your president, who becomes your governor? Are they going to set up military bases in Kenya? Are we going to have all these insurgents being funded from the north or from the east? I think for me, I don't love the French as an ally. If you were to ask me, I would want them to just be friends like everybody else, but being a serious ally, especially when they're being chased out of the West, for us to give them so much of a space is a risk. Maybe, obviously, we also have a president who signs off stuff for his personal need. I don't know what it is this time round. But there are many risks. I think Matt has also handled that the French are already signing a deal, and they want total immunity in anything they do in the country. They do not want to be asked any question. That's also very risky. It is extremely risky. Look, if you were to ask me, we would have sat out of this like everybody else. The French is not a very good ally. I'll return the microphone back to you, Eli. But for me, let's have friends, but let's be very, very careful. I think we might turn out to be all these countries that are having insurgents, they're having wars, and they're having all these problems. Even Ivory Coast, I think somebody was trying to use Ivory Coast as an example. Please check what happened in Ivory Coast around the 2010s. They've had a lot of problems, in fact, as a country. Thank you.
All right. That is Diamond's perspective in terms of why Kenya might not just be on the advantageous side of this France-Kenya relationship, looking at the historical perspective And some of the immunities that were signed before, we had an aggressive interaction between Kenya and Tanzania, not Tanzania, but I don't know why I'm in Tanzania. Probably it's because the president has been taking a lot of trips, meeting presidents. And I don't know, Sitati, a lot of presidents are clearly interacting. What is happening? Is it the midterms? Is it the pre-elections? Maybe we'll come to that in a few, but you want to give a quick comment on that, Sitati. Why is it that there's a lot of activity around?
Well, I mean, to me, it's not really something new or not something really shocking. I mean, presidents or heads of states and governments are always bound to have all these sorts of interactions and whatnot. But obviously, I think if we can check the data, I don't really have the exact raw figures with me. But over time, I mean, we've seen increased, trips and meetings between heads of states and governments, and this coincides with the fact that there's an increase, by foreign powers in Africa, and also, African countries or African heads of states and governments also want to be seen to be working. Obviously, I mean, we are not really saying that all these deals or agreements that are signed are perfect. Some are signed for personal reasons, personal gains. I mean, that happens a lot. It's been happening for many years since African countries got independence, right? But it's the usual positioning. I mean, the interests. What are you giving me? What am I getting out of this? Yeah. So. And I think largely thanks to China. But also interesting enough, you remember when William Ruto became president in 2022, he set out on, he used to have so many trips, especially outside the country. Almost every week he was flying out of the country with huge budgets, wastage of taxpayers' money and all that kind of things.
Yeah.
Until the 2024 finance bills bill protest happened,
Yeah.
and then he slowed down on that. But I mean, it's just a recalibration of, or rather scaling up of interest by most of these heads of states and governments. So I think it will be interesting maybe to listen to the spirits of Magufuli, what he'd say, because he was not really sold out on having these so many trips regionally and abroad.
Thank you very much. That is Sitati Wasilwa. Sitati Wasilwa is a political analyst, political risk analyst, and of course, if you want to discuss much about geopolitics, he's the man to go to. But we are crossing over to 16 minutes after 9 p.m. Kenyan time. Welcome to The Bigger Picture this Monday. And we are asking, why Kenya? Because the French seem to be warming up to East Africa. And Nairobi looks to be like the gateway for these relationships.
The Bigger Picture with Obet Oriku and Likuyani Eli. For more information, visit www.mizani254.org. Mizani 254, where the scales of balance are restored and meaningful conversations thrive.
All right, I think Obet's missed that memo. But anyway, Obet's...
no, I'm trying to clarify because I can't hear.
Yes, I understand. I understand. There was some mishap on your end. Probably you'll have allowed me to do a playback. But that's gone. That's gone with the wind. Thank you very much for joining. And again, Obet, I want to cross over back to you. You had Sitati mentioning about the flying president. We even had some Kenyans, very gallant Kenyans, compiling the numbers and telling us how the president was moving around. It would be interesting for you to note that the Finance Bill 2026 is out for public participation, and the office of the president has received some substantial amount of money. I'm not going to mention the figures. It's you to go and find out how much before you can start lynching us on this session, because that's not our conversation. Over to you back, Obed, and take over, please.
Eli, the cue you set was a bit off, and probably my network didn't help me. That said, I think Weston was speaking to something that I would like to hear more about, and specifically, what is his take? And Weston, what is your take of the dalliance between Kenya, Nairobi, and France in terms of what are the benefits, and in the long term, is it beneficial, or do you see any drawbacks or things that would concern you, or it's all good and green to go?
Obeds, of course, if you've got a friend who is more experienced at what they are doing, are really interested in learning the craft, it's incumbent upon you to learn the ropes. They can run you through what they've been doing over the years. It's your responsibility to learn the ropes. So this is Kenya's responsibility. The French have been at this game for millennia. It's a colonial power. That's what they are. You can say, oh, they are losing ground in parts of West Africa, but they are a colonial power. What it means is that those West African countries you see former French colonies, they are culturally tied to the French. Yeah. The French are really embedded in their psyche, the education system, people-to-people exchanges, culture, politics, economy, the military, the way they run the state. Those things, you cannot wish them away. It's like you're completely, you're trying to fight against yourself. In effect, that's what it is. The same thing applies to former British colonies. How do you just wake up and say you decouple yourself from the British? How? That's what you are. That is what you are. So consciousness is what we're talking about here. Consciousness. That when you have got friends, do you know what your friends are up to? You know, these things, if you take them at the interpersonal level, they crystallize. It's not about interstate relations, just even at interpersonal level. Do you really appreciate what your friends are up to? Or you have no idea what they're up to? When you deal with them, do you foreground your interests? Do you? Or you think they act altruistically? They will always guard your interest. No matter what you do, you don't have to lift a finger. That is not the case. That is not the case. And the fact that the French are losing ground in parts of West Africa, that means they are vulnerable. They're not as strong as they were before. They're vulnerable. And so if you're strategic, like Nairobi, William Ruto, whoever it is, you can extract a better deal from them. That's what it is. Because they want legitimacy in Africa. That's what they're striving for, legitimacy. And to them, it doesn't matter whether they get it from their former colonies or former British colonies or Lusophone Africa. They just want legitimacy. Why? Because without Africa, as one former Italian prime minister put it quite evocatively, France will be just another third world country without Africa. So, well, Africa is big to French interests, French aspirations, French ambitions. Africa is central to French ambitions. That's what it is. Therefore, it's up to you. You as a Kenyan citizen, you as a Kenyan leader or Nigerian leader, do you appreciate that? So this notion that the French are better or worse or British, no, it can't be, Obets. It cannot be. Because there is no altruistic imperialist. There's no such a thing as an altruistic imperialist. To put it differently, there's no such a thing as a better slave master. There's no such a thing as a better slave master. I hear these things like they're atrocious things. Yeah, I've got a master, but my master is better than your master. Why do you have a master in the first place? Why unit chains? Why unit chains? You shouldn't be having a master. You shouldn't be having a slave driver. It can't be that the British are better than the French. In what sense? Nigeria is not functioning. It's ever punching below its weight. That country, that size, population-wise, economically, culturally, that's a huge country with a lot of potential. They are ever punching below their weight. Isn't that a former British colony? Sierra Leone, if you talk about state failure, Sierra Leone is a classic example of state failure. State has completely collapsed. When Sierra Leone dissolved into civil war, Sierra Leone is not a former British colony. It's not. Kenya, South Africa, they have this dubious distinction as amongst the most unequal societies in the world, just not in Africa, in the world. Remind me again, these are former French colonies, or these are Lusophone Africa. These are former British colonies. So Buckingham Palace is just as vicious as Élysée Palace in France. I can put it to you. The Oval Office in DC is just as vicious as any office you may think of. Kremlin, Beijing. I'm saying I can't put this well enough. These guys are brutal. They deal with power. And they couldn't care less. They may smile, they may come, take photo ops and whatever. I can put it to you. They couldn't care less about your interests unless you're going to jealously, doggedly guard your interests. That is if you can. And if you know that they're weak, and at least you can extract something out of them. But to say, no, we don't want the French. We want these ones. No, that's tantamount to saying, I don't want this master. This is the master I prefer. Then the question I ask Obet, why are you fixated with the master? Why? Why do you want to be in leg chains, in fetters? You don't want to be free? You don't want to be free? That's the question. So I'm saying, Obet, look here. The French, you know their history. You know the history of the British. You know the history of the Italians. The Americans, they're still here. You can go on and on. The Dutch, they're also the Germans. These are colonial powers. We know the atrocities. The mistake you can make is to try and calibrate these powers. This one is gentle. This one is brutal. This one is better. This one's a little bit better than no. That's not how to read these people and politics and power. So I'm saying Nairobi has been actually like Nigeria punching below its weight for the longest time. In the region, Rwanda, even as we speak now, has got more diplomatic heft than Nairobi. Uganda has more diplomatic heft than Nairobi. Ethiopia, more diplomatic heft than Nairobi. The question is why? And you're saying in Nairobi is a UN hub, and why? The answer lies in how we're discussing these things. We do not position ourselves continentally, globally. We don't. We look at politics from a moralistic standpoint, moralism. No, this is bad. We want bad leaders. These are bad leaders. We want good leaders. We want to deal with better, actors. These are bad actors. Which ones are better and which ones are bad? There's no such a thing. It's just power. It's just interests. Be they military, economic, political, diplomat. Those are interests. The question is, do you know your interests? If you don't, tough luck.
I think, Weston, that's the place to really place it. Because the reality is, it's about interest. You must know what your value is and leverage on that to be able to get the most out of that. This is Maximilian Goya. Matt, I can see your hand, but allow Maximilian to speak because this come up here. I'll allow each of you to have a bite again, especially Matt, because I think you've been raising your hand for some time. Maximilian, welcome to the conversation. And Eli, I think we have a few more minutes before we can end the conversation. But
Yeah, let's try
get
and
your
pace it up
Maximilian.
because we are running out of time.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Maximilian, please welcome to the conversation.
Okay. I'm just impressed and I'm just listening to you guys. I have nothing to add on. Weston has already spoken enough. I spoke my mind out. So.
Well, thank you for at least admitting that. So, Martin, let me allow you to be able to make a contribution, and then we'll go around the room, back to Ravenix and then Diamonds, as we look at ending the conversation. Matt?
Okay, thank you. So first I'll say I'm an anti-imperialist and I'm also Pan-African, okay, in terms of my ideology. It's at least good amongst maybe the others I may hold. And it's important to know what you stand for, because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, okay? It's very important as a people, as an African people. Pan-Africanism as an ideology has given Black people in Africa and around the world more rights than they had. So basically the civil rights in the United States. It is what was used to fight colonialism. So Africans work together from across the entire world, from across any place that has Afro-descendant people. And at the core of this was solidarity, okay? And that solidarity meant if I am fighting an enemy, you're not then supposed to go in and give that enemy a place to stay. Now, another thing is that Africans as a people, one of their weaknesses is that they do not also speak with one voice, right? The idea that you will separate yourself from the rest of the continent and have any meaningful negotiating power with world powers, to me, it has proved to be a failure. Yeah. The other thing is that when you look at even how the world powers work, they also negotiate in blocks together. When they are sanctioning countries, when they are fighting, when they are pushing companies to act better, like the European Union, or when they are containing rising powers, like when they are containing China. Okay, that's one thing. Now, one of Africa's main weaknesses is that Africans don't work together. They, in fact, will sabotage each other. Now, the other thing is the idea that imperialism has done more good than bad, or that if Africans left to their own devices, they would fail. The fact is that Africans have had their economies sabotaged, they've had their leaders assassinated, and they've had a lot of bad things happen to them, all across the board, all due to the imperialists. If Africans were so, incompetent, they would have been led to fail on their own. The fact that so much effort has been put to nick up the growth of the emergence of ideologies and ideas and basically people who would free the continent, shows that Africans can work without imperialist help. Okay. So in my opinion, Africans should stand in solidarity with each other, not sabotaging each other in terms of how they work. So that's one thing. And that imperialism is bad. The other thing that I will also say is that there are differences to evil. There are degrees to evil. There are degrees to bad that can be done. We know this because there are different sentences that are given to different crimes. There's such a thing as murder. There's such a thing as manslaughter. To compare French imperialism to British imperialism, at least in Africa to date, I do not see them because, as I said, to this day, not even to this day, currently as we speak, the French and the Ukrainians are working to bomb the AES countries or destabilize those countries, if I may use a better term. This is also happening across the Francophone world, Not to mention, like when we talk about the petrodollar and the fact that the US controls currency and trade around the world, it also, the French do control the currencies in their former colonies, and also I talked about these countries having to pay for being colonized, and that when the French were leaving these countries, they destroyed infrastructure and even salted the earth, basically to ensure crops did not grow. So yeah, all evil is bad, but there are degrees to evil, and it's important that Africa negotiates as a bloc and works together. Thank you.
I think I'm going to go back to the studio. Eli, get to hear what Sitati has to say. I think we'll have you, let's finalize the conversation.
Yes, Sitati seems to be having unsettling objection with what Matt just shared about the bombing and how the French are working. Sitati, you seem to be shaking your head. What's bothering you, sir?
I mean, maybe the Ukrainians, but I think it's an erratic claim to suggest that perhaps the French financing or aiding support in any way to be it the Azawad Liberation Front in northern Mali, or the Al Qaeda affiliated Janim insurgent group in northern and central parts of Mali. So I'm really yet to see any convincing evidence on that. But just to close it off from my end, look, I never wish to be, or rather to approach this subject of discussion regarding the French in Kenya, especially with regard to the summit that is ongoing in Nairobi from an emotional sort of perspective. It is evident that the French government over the last 9 or so years, I mean since 2017 when Emmanuel Macron became the president, they have been working towards this, and this is an outcome of long-term plans which were laid back then. So I think that's why sometimes it's good to consume what comes out of the media, but also it's important to try and step back from the noise and try to engage some sort of mechanics behind the scene just to think through things. So it's a culmination, of what the French government has been intending to do, and now it is being actualized. And even in Kenya, it's not that the French have not been in Kenya. It's not that the French are now going to come for the first time in the country. They have been around. Perhaps not as in a much more assertive way as they were, let's say, in Francophone countries, right? But we've had French-owned businesses in this country. And I think when you look at the statistics over the last, 14 or 15 years, the number of French-owned businesses have technically increased from around, 40 to 140 at this time. So they have been around for some time. And even in terms of foreign direct investment, the French, credit to them. There are among some of the largest contributors to that. And I think over the last decade, those statistics are quite telling. These guys have been here for some time. So it's not an accident. It's not something like it's a nightmare that is bound to happen or that is happening. So my takeaway is this: the French are already here. They have been here. So how is Kenya going to strategically benefit from this kind of a relationship? But how I wish that the Kenyan government and other African governments need to learn how to have very strategic negotiators. Because what happens mostly is these guys who go negotiating for these agreements, most of them I don't really think they are well acquainted with what it comes through these partnerships. But as we say, these are things that are likely to mature as we go with time. So those are my submissions, and thank you for having me. I hope to see you some other time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that is Sitati Wasilwa, who has been joining us virtually to discuss the issues surrounding the Kenya and the French relationship, which in this case it's through the African Forward Summit that is currently underway in Nairobi, Kenya. And by the way, you people have bad manners. When people are making their presentations, you're making noise. The president became very unpresidential, akakuwa class prefect. Maybe we'll talk about that some time back when time allows. But for now, Obeds, there you have it. That is the reservations that Sitati Wasilwa has. And he opines that we need to come to an understanding that sometimes we don't have to enter into these talks with our emotions. It's political, it is strategic, and it's what you can squeeze from your partner or possibly the competitor that you have on the table. But do we bring the sharpest tool from our toolbox, or do we just deploy any other person to negotiate for what Kenya desires? I'm going to cross over. I see Diamond's hand is up. Diamonds, the mic is yours. Kindly proceed.
No, I just had a quick question to Sitati, but I think he might have dropped.
He's still here with us.
I don't think
Sitati
it
is still
makes
here
sense
with
to ask
us.
the question.
Go ahead.
Minimum.
Go ahead. He's still here with us.
Okay, I wanted to ask, what are the risks that he sees based on the history of the French on the West? What are the risks to the Kenyan nation on two fronts? Number one, what are the risks in terms of political interference, either both in the military side or at the political space where we are trying to get democratic, though we haven't gotten there yet, but many of the French countries have not been given the space. The countries especially that were, and when I say many, please underline the word many, I'm not talking about one country, so don't pick one to use as an example. Many of those countries have not been allowed to really operate democratically, elect leaders, have a better political working system. Ours is obviously work in progress. That's number one. Number two, there are the risks of the wars and the insurgents that have gone through most of these countries since the colonial powers left, especially the French, which is both on the political side and in terms of resources, where it is known out there that the French has actually taken most of the resources from these countries compared to other powers. Please, just so that to make it known, I'm not saying the British have never taken anything out of the countries where they were the colonial powers. But if you compare the amount of evil, especially what Matt was saying, is that there are different layers. There are different layers. Somebody takes everything, others take a little bit. So what are the risks to the Kenyan state in that space? Obviously, you've said, Kenyans will not negotiate well. We will send funny guys to go and sign those deals. So they will obviously sign bad deals. That we all know. Okay, see that.
Well, quite a lengthy question. I don't know where to get it from, but I hope Sitati...
No, there were two questions.
Yes.
There were just two questions. I was trying to explain the exact point. It was the political interference, which is both political and military, and secondly, in terms of resources, the minerals and every other thing. These are things that the French have done in the West. Now it's coming to Kenya. What are the risks? How do you mitigate that?
Well, I hope you'll be able to hear me clearly. Trying to lean towards my microphone. I mean, it's raining quite heavily where I am. I'll start with the second question, which touches on insecurity or security related and the issues to do with insurgencies. I think when you scrutinize, if you've been closely following the discussions, the biggest takeaway with me, I mean, regarding these conversations and developments around, the relations between France and Kenya, is that obviously Kenya intends to get some assistance from the French in relation to security. These armed conflicts that in various parts of, the region, especially the Horn of Africa. I mean, the threat from the Al-Shabaab and the Islamic State in many parts of Somalia. And then obviously the spillovers from the multiple conflicts that we have in between Ethiopia and Eritrea and various parts of Ethiopia, for instance, the Tigray region, Oromia region, I mean Amhara, and all the way to South Sudan and Sudan itself. So the major point is, in as much as there have been, I mean, uneasiness. You remember when there were some 600 or 800 French soldiers that were in Mombasa the other day. I think for me, it will be not them being directly involved in combat activities, but rather focused on enhancing, the capabilities of the Kenyan security apparatus in terms of intelligence sharing and other related trainings. But I don't really see if the French maybe will be actively involved in combat. I mean, deploying boats on the ground to directly fight against some of these insurgencies that are going across the region. That's my take. Secondly, in terms of political interference, that is a very big concern. I mean, when you look at the conversations that are taking place on social media, and it is pegged, as we said before, and repeatedly so, on the wretched history that France has, especially the western part of Africa. Maybe in a very great way, like what the United States has always been doing, what the Britons have been doing in Kenya, and any other powers, foreign powers that have vested interest in Kenya, especially from the western part of the world. They may, at some point when you have elections, I mean, they'd obviously take sides. Yeah, they say, okay, they may not say it directly, but through some hints here there, they are going to demonstrate we have a preference for candidate so and so. Yeah. And obviously, when something happens in Kenya, maybe you have protests, people have been butchered. The obvious things. I mean, we have the French embassy here. Statements are always being issued. I mean, collectively, I think there'll be anything new, in my view, regarding the French, perspective in relation to the local politics that we have here. I think their major work would be to support